this topic today. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. So, yeah. So
Excellent.
Chris, you are there, right?
Yes, I am here. Hello.
Fantastic. So nice to see you again after a long time.
Yes, it has been. Thank you so much. I enjoy speaking here, and so I appreciate the opportunity to do that again. So,
yeah. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, who participated and from the morning and then from different channels. This is Zoom, and then we have members in YouTube. Those who want to make it easy to have in Facebook, and we also have in Restream. So there are multiple channels open now. So everybody is attending based on their convenience. So I would like to invite Chris Whit, Dr. Chris from United States. So thank you, Dr. Chris, for joining the session today. And
you bet.
I'm actually waiting for your session to hear. We talk about, Chris talk about collaborative planning across multi-enterprise supply chain networks today. Chris was with over 20 plus years of experience and $10 billion plus business impact. He's a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, a PMP, a supply chain expert, and whatnot. Okay, so he excels in end-to-end product and system development from design to logistics and operations. His strengths lie in process improvement, strategic planning, risk management, supply chain optimization. A proven leader, he helps organizations drive efficiency and reduce total cost of ownership. So thank you, Dr. Chris, for joining the session today, and like to hear your key insights. Thank you.
You bet. Glad to be here, and the Dr. Chris is something new for me. So that it's so interesting to hear that.
Yeah, and you don't call yourself, even though you did DBA, you don't call yourself. But we call it, no problem.
Exactly. And you'll have to excuse me. I had one of those things. I cut myself shaving this morning and I won't stop bleeding. So I apologize to everybody that you may see me do this every once in a while. Of course, that's what happens when you're about to present. So, but yeah, I'm excited to show some very interesting results today, where I've done some other stuff with stress testing supply chains and things like that. And now I'm going to get into some really interesting results as we begin to think about supply chains as a system. So can I go ahead and start and share my screen?
Yeah, please proceed.
Okay. And what I'll do is, like before, I struggle. It doesn't work well to actually go into presentation mode. So is this large enough for?
No, it is good. No, you can do presentation mode because this is Zoom, so it's easy. It's not a complicated platform.
Well, let's find out.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, just click on it. Yes, perfect.
Yep. Does that work?
Yes, it's working.
Okay, so you're going to see me look slightly to the side here. Okay.
Yeah, no.
So fantastic. So I do want to talk about collaborative planning across the entire supply chain, which is a very interesting concept. And some of the modeling and simulation that we do with SCM blocks allows us to do this, to see the impact of that. So it's very interesting. So what I want to start with is, give me just a second here. I've used this slide before, but it helps to give a system perspective. That this is not your supply chain. This supply chain, when you hear people talk about supply chains, they talk about, well, my supplier, I get something from my supplier. I've got my own I've got distribution centers, or I've got customers, and maybe the supplier sends to me at the OEM, and I'm put it out to my distribution centers. Maybe my supplier ships directly to my distribution centers. Maybe my supplier even ships directly to my customers. But it's typically just tier one. In reality, this is your supply chain. Your tier one suppliers are greatly impacted by their tier one suppliers, who are impacted by their tier one suppliers, which of course, for me as the OEM or wherever I am in the supply chain, makes it my tier one, tier two, tier three. So it gets deeper. So if we're not looking at all of this, then we have very little impact in our small view of the supply chain. So we talk resilience, things like that. So when it comes to resilience, resilience is actually a system phenomena. So the only way to truly understand how resilient your supply chain is, or how resilient you are within your supply chain, is to treat the supply chain as a system and do some what if scenarios and all that to see how the system, the supply chain as a system, reacts, responds, and recovers to various changes, because that's how we figure out how resilient we are. So some of the things I've talked about before, I want to add to, but I want to kind of go back and remind everybody sort of what we had talked about before. That there are 4 common methods for increasing resiliency. So the first and the most common that's talked about is adding a supplier. So instead of just having one supplier for a critical part, I may add another supplier. And maybe it's nearby, maybe it's even in another geographical location, something like that. But we typically, one approach is to add more suppliers to get redundancy. Another approach is to regionalize suppliers. So in the United States, we talk a lot about onshoring or reshoring some of the manufacturing or some of the activities we have put overseas. And so regionalizing suppliers means just bringing them closer so that there's not as much transportation time, transport time. There may not be, you may also eliminate international trade contingencies or tariffs, anything like that, by bringing suppliers closer to you, to your facility. And so that's another approach. A third approach is to add inventory at various places within the supply chain. And so here in this diagram, the bigger dot represents more inventory. And so I may figure out that it's good for me to have extra inventory and it's good for one of my suppliers, but not everyone in the whole supply chain needs to have extra inventory. Maybe we can figure out there's some critical spots within the supply chain that allow for, that make it most beneficial. The fourth that we've talked about before is increasing priority, just simply doing that. So if I've got, if I'm low on I'm not an important customer to one of my suppliers, well, I may do some things, pay some premiums, something like that to make myself more important and increase my priority so that when my supplier only has a little bit that they can provide, they will send that to me instead of somebody else. So these are typically the 4 methods for increasing resiliency. What I want to introduce today is a 5th method, which is coordinating policies. And so what I've represented here is that I've got this supply chain, and those are supposed to represent dials, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the dials represent policies, how we act and react to different things. So for example, if I've got an inventory control policy that is very aggressive, where if I have a gap in my desired inventory and my actual inventory, I try to close that gap quickly. I'm very aggressive. I'm badgering my supplier. I'm even ordering extra, doing things like that to make sure I quickly, or as quickly as possible, I get my deliveries. You could also be less aggressive and more slower and take your time. But the point is, everyone in the supply chain is doing the same thing and working together and working with the same sort of level of aggression, or I used aggression before, but the policies are very similar. You have everyone's either slow, everyone's fast, whatever it happens to be, and we'll get into that and what that looks like in just a little bit. That's what our simulations will be about, is this 5th method. So let's walk through a simple what if scenario, and I want to consider lean activities for this because people have because of COVID, because of the pandemic, there's been a lot of blame on lean for it being brittle, and it's been even called, it's counterproductive to resilience. And my theory is that the way we have implemented lean as individual companies has not worked. And we're going to show that if there's more coordination, that lean is actually a powerful approach. But let me kind of build up to this a little bit by walking through just a little bit. If you're not familiar with lean, I want to walk through some of that. So within the world of lean, typically I'm in a company and I'm looking at my processes. And so the concepts that we tend to talk about for lean for my processes are something called takt time, which is kind of the drum beat or the cadence at which things should happen to match customer demand. So if the customer wants 10 deliveries, 10 items delivered a day, then my cadence of my process has to be able to deliver 10 a day. It doesn't mean I have to completely do 10 within one day. It just means the delivery rate at the end. So it's kind of like an assembly line where everyone works the exact same rate. So think of a drum beat going off and everyone's doing things according to that drum beat. And so so that's takt time. There's also what's called load leveling, which means I'm going to even out the work so that I can match that takt time. So if I find that one activity in my process has too much work and it's taking too long and they can't meet my 10 deliveries a day, then I want to make adjustments and reduce the work there. And maybe there's another step in the process that has less work to do and they can do 15 or 20. So they have extra capacity and give some of the work over there. So it's called load leveling or leveling so that everyone has about the same amount of work to do. And so there's some smoothness. So everyone's working at the same rate and there's smoothness to it. So that's typically how lean is looked at for a company. So I'm looking at my processes in my company and doing that. So I want to take that and I want to actually apply those same concepts to the supply chain. So instead of talking about all process steps occurring at the same cadence, I want to now talk about all deliveries occurring at the same cadence based on the end customer demand for the OEM or whoever is at the top of that supply chain. And now when it comes to load leveling, instead of the work at each process step should take about the same amount of time, we're now talking about the work at each company and that we want to distribute work or move work to make the among the companies now to level the load. And so that's taking the concept of lean for processes and applying them to at a company level. And so if this is a process, for example, I mentioned 10 deliveries a day, then we want to see 10 moving from process step 1 to process step 2 each day or each time, whatever that time frame happens to be. We're saying a day here. So 10 a day. And so I ought to see all that move. That's my drum beat. If this were companies now, it's the same concept. I want to see 10 move between my companies. Everyone's delivering 10 a day to the next company in the supply chain. And so that's how that sort of looks. And in reality, what you really want to do is get yourself in this kind of situation where the companies are delivering 10 a day. And within each company, the processes are delivering 10 a day also. So not only is it lean and smooth from company to company, but within each company, it's also lean and smooth. And I like to call this, and I don't know that I came up with the term, but macro lean is the company level and micro lean is within a company. So there's intercompany between companies and there's intra-company within a company. And so far we've typically focused on the micro lean or within a company. So actually, we just came out with these results yesterday. So these were presented yesterday, and I have permission to show them today as well. So this was the webinar where we presented this. So I'm going to walk through, you know me, I like to show results from simulations if you've seen any of my other presentations. And so we're going to walk through some of that right now. So what you see here is what we're going to build up to in the simulation. You see the companies, 3 companies, so like some 3 tiers of suppliers. And they each have a dial, you see. And if you happen to see the movie Spinal Tap, there's a joke in there where the dials don't go to 10, they go to 11. So I'm just trying to be a little funny there and have a movie reference and have the dials go to 11. But those dials represent those policies that I talked about. And so we're going to focus on a specific policy of the desired recovery time to get to my desired finished goods buffer. And if you see at the very top of the diagram, I'm showing what's happening within each company. They get deliveries and they have inventory of raw materials that then go into production, that then go into the finished goods inventory, and from there they deliver to their customer. And maybe that's the next company in the supply chain, or maybe it's the end customer. But the desired recovery time to get to desired finished goods buffer is when I have a gap. So let's say I'm trying to hold 200 in my finished goods inventory and I find myself at 100. So I've got to make up a gap of 100. And I can either try to do that quickly, aggressively, like I was giving an example earlier. And so that represents, we're going to call that a high aggression or a fast recovery time. At the other end, we're going to call it low aggression, a low recovery time, is I'm going to be slow about it. I want to take my time. I don't know that everything that I'm seeing in demand is true. So I'm going to kind of average that. So if you think of demand forecasting, it's like a moving average. It's averaging over a longer period of time so that I'm not reacting really quickly to changes. I'm kind of taking my time and I'm reacting just a little bit. And so we're going to look at those situations. You're going to hear me use the words high, medium, and low. And high means I'm very aggressive to close that gap. I over order. I'm just trying to get everything as quickly as possible. Medium means I'm somewhere in between. Low means I'm very slow about it. I want to take my time. So that's what we're going to look at in some scenarios, some simulations. So what I want to start with is just a very simple scenario where the demand to the OEM, in this example, we are the OEM, the demand bumps by 25%. And so if you've ever played the beer game, this is like the beer game where demand is stable, then it bumps up, and then it's stable. And so we're going to use that as the first demand pattern because you get to see how everything kind of reacts, and it's a good example to start with. This is a very busy slide, but I'm going to point you at certain places. What I'm looking at right now is in my supply chain, there's only me, the OEM, and a tier one. That's all I'm looking at so far. So that's all my supply chain is. There's nothing else. It's only me and a tier one. The tier one is the end of the supply chain. It's a very short supply chain. And what I have across the top, high, medium, low, are the policies for the tier one. And on the left, high, medium, and low are the policies for the OEM. And all the graphs are just combinations of each of those. So in the upper left, we have high, high. Me, the OEM, is being very aggressive, and the tier one is being very aggressive in terms of closing that gap in inventory. If we go down now to the lower right, we're low, low. So we're both being very slow and controlled. And then, of course, there's medium, medium in the middle. And then I've shown all the other combinations. That's what's great about doing this kind of simulation with SCM blocks is that we can hold variables steady and just change one thing and see what that one thing, the impact that one thing had on the performance. So I'm going to direct you back to the upper left, the high, high situation. And you'll see some little bit of bullwhip effect. You see some oscillations, and that's a typical reaction when there's a bump in demand. We usually lose a little bit of inventory, and then we try to regain that inventory. So in the chart, all these charts are the same scale, so these are all equivalent, and you're seeing very different reactions and patterns. But if we stay with that high, high in the upper left, you'll see the blue line is me, the OEM, my finished goods. I dip and I kind of come back. My tier one dips, overshoots, and kind of does some oscillation, does a little bit of the bullwhip effect. And then if I go to the medium in the middle, you'll see there's, again, I'm kind of, the OEM is dipping and coming back. I'm the blue solid line, and then the green dash line is the tier one, and they dip and they sort of overshoot, but not as bad. And now look at the low situation in the lower right. And when both the OEM and the tier one are low, you'll see it's a bit more controlled. I don't have, if you compare the high to the low, you see a big difference in the behavior. And what I want to point out is that in the upper left, the high situation, yes, there is chaos, there's some oscillations, but it actually, you'll see that everything settles down rather quickly compared to the lower right, the low situation, where there's not chaos, but it drags it out and it takes longer for it to settle down, so to speak. And so that's what we're going to look at now. I just wanted you to see a very simple supply chain, and I want you to see this way I've laid it out here, and the high, the medium, low, because we're going to use that going forward. So I spent a lot of time on this slide because I want you to understand, so we can go through the other slides a little faster. So now what I want to do is I want to take a look at that same situation, but I'm going to drop demand back down. So I'm going to increase demand, just what you saw, 25%, but only for 20 weeks, and then it drops back down. And what that does is it makes it a more dynamic situation in the simulation, because while everyone is still adjusting to the increased demand and they're moving up, then suddenly it drops and they have to start shifting down, and so you see these extra dynamics. So we're going to look at that. So it's going to raise for a while and then drop back down. Now I want to introduce some metrics to you, some resilience metrics. So when we talk about resilience, this is the way we measure it and look at it. The first thing is amplitude. And what that is when I see these oscillations and the zigzag, the back and forth with inventory, then the amplitude is simply taking the maximum I ever have minus the minimum. What's the biggest delta that I have? And we do that in percentage rather than actual numbers, because it really, when you're doing some of this, what matters is that I see a 50% or 100% shift. And sometimes it doesn't help me if you tell me 72. That only means something when I know what the 72 is compared with. So we're always talking percentages here. Then there's the time to recover, which is once I introduce the change, how long does it take me to finally kind of get to my settle down a little bit? And within 5% is what we're going to say. So it doesn't have to be exactly, because you can see sometimes it takes a long time to sort of drag out. And so we're going to say within 5%. So we've got amplitude, time to recover, and then we've got cycles or swings. And a cycle or swing is just a combination of a high-low or a low-high. So in this example, I'm showing you there are 3 cycles here. You can see one, there's a low and a high, then it dips again and goes up, and so that's a second one, then it drops and comes back up as a third one. So in this example, I can see the amplitude, the highest minus the lowest. I can see the time to recover when the initial change starts and when we finally settle back down. And then I can count those cycles and swings. So we're going to look at that, but first I'm going to show you a graph again, the graph version. Now remember, you can see with the black line in each of these, demand goes up, and instead of staying up, it drops back down. And so you'll see a lot more oscillations because, like I said, everyone is reacting and growing their inventory and then suddenly have to drop their inventory. So here in the upper left, where you have the high, both the OEM, me, and the tier one are aggressive and trying to close their gap very quickly. So as soon as there's a gap, they're ordering, they're over ordering, they're trying to hold extra and do all that. And you can see that bullwhip effect a lot more. Especially there's the blue line, which is me, but the tier one is getting yanked around quite a bit. And now I'm going to direct your eyes down to to the bottom right corner where you see the low-low combination, and everyone is sort of, the OEM and the tier one are taking their time, we see less oscillations. It's not as bad, but again, it takes a while to settle down. But I want to present that same information in this form. I talked about amplitude, time to recover, and cycles. So now what you just saw on the chart before, I'm looking at those three metrics for both the OEM and the tier one for all those situations. And again, you really just want to look at the upper left corner, the high, and the bottom right corner, the low. And so in the upper left, the high, the OEM has an amplitude of 63%. That's the biggest, the most they had minus the minimum. The tier one had 141%. You'll notice the time to recover for the OEM is 34 weeks. Tier one is 50 weeks. And the OEM has 2 cycles, 2 ups and downs, and the tier one has 4 ups and downs. Now we go to the bottom right and we look at the low where we're slower, we're more controlled. And the amplitude for the OEM is 68%, so about the same. But you'll notice the tier one dropped from 141% down to 103%. So amplitudes was the same for the OEM, but a little smaller for the tier one. And you'll notice the cycles went from 2 and 4 to 1 and 1. So we cut out some cycles. But the time to recover got longer. I went from 34 for the OEM to 56, and I went from 50 for the tier one to 57. So we see that sort of trade-off of control versus time. And so when the amplitude, when we're trying to react quickly, our amplitudes and cycles increase, but we have a shorter recovery time. When we're taking our time, of course, the recovery time is longer, and we're a little more controlled. So you're sort of trading off chaos for time. But that was just an OEM and a tier one. Now what I want to do is take that exact same scenario, but put a tier two on the end of the supply chain. So now I have an OEM, a tier one, and a tier two. Now that creates 3, if I'm going to do high, medium, and low for everybody, then that's 3 times 3 times 3, 27 graphs. I'm not going to show 27 graphs. Instead, what I'm going to do is show everyone doing the same thing. So it was the diagonal in that other, on the other slides. So there's everyone highly aggressive trying to close the gap. There's everyone medium, and there's everyone low. So this is the OEM, the tier one, and the tier two all doing the same things. Now you'll see on the all high, you see some reaction there. You see, and you can see I've added now a third line, a dotted red line for the tier two, and you can see the OEM, kind of the solid blue line does a little bit of oscillation. The dashed green line, which is the tier one, is a little bit more. And then the tier two, the dotted red line, is even more. And you'll see that their amplitudes are 68%, 126, and 214. Their times to recover, 44 weeks, 51, and 45. And then the cycles are 1, 2, and 3. So, of course, that tier 2 has 3 cycles. It's going crazy back there. If we now start moving and we go to the low, everyone's low, you'll see the amplitude for the OEM stays the same. The tier 1 is less. The tier 2 is significantly less. But the time to recovers have now grown from 44, 51, and 45 up to 59, 54, and 78. So quite a bit. But the cycles have settled down. So I just wanted y'all to see, now we've got two tiers, so OEM, tier 1, tier 2. And this is how the supply chain responds, and this is what happens to everybody. Now I want to get even more complicated and add a tier 3. So the supply chain's longer. Exact same thing, bump in demand that goes back down. Well, now we have 4 lines on each chart. We got the OEM, the tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3. And the tier 3 is this solid gray line that's the biggest that you see in all of these charts. So you're seeing the bullwhip effect, right? You're seeing the OEM has a little bit, the tier 1 has a little bit more, the tier 2 has a little bit more, and then the tier 3 is getting yanked around a lot. And in fact, when everyone is very aggressive in the first chart on the left, you'll see that The tier 3 has 6 cycles. You can even see zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. A lot of, wait, order more. Wait, don't order more. Order more. Don't order more. A lot of that is going on because they're trying to quickly make changes. And you can see the amplitude. So we're in the all high. We're on the left here. The amplitudes grow, just like we see with the bullwhip effect, from 57% for the OEM to 211% for the tier 3. And you'll see that there's, the time to recover sort of varies for everybody, but it's shorter for the OEM and tends to get longer for the tier 3. And then we talked about the cycles, 1, 2, 2, and then 6 for that tier 3. If we go to everyone low, then you'll see that some of the amplitudes and cycles decrease, and it just so happens that the time to recover really doesn't change that much for anybody on this. It just takes a long time, and you can see from the charts that looks about right. So here's where it starts to get interesting, and this is where I want us to focus and start talking about the example we're going to use is lean. So on the left here is that same chart that we just saw with all 3 suppliers, or all the way down to the tier 3, exactly what we saw on the previous chart for everyone in the high. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that one by one, each company by themselves is implementing some lean stuff, lean activities. So we're going to pretend that they can reduce their cycle time, their production time by half, 50%, and they can also reduce their safety stock. So they're trying to do things quicker and leaner, not hold as much inventory. So when only the OEM does this, everyone else still acts the same as they were before. You'll see there are some improvements. You can just look at the chart, the lines, and see there's a little bit of improvement. And if we go look at the table, you can see the amplitudes have changed, have decreased. The time to recover has decreased. The cycles have decreased. And I have some arrows down there in the lower right. And what those are representing, if it's a short arrow, it means there was some improvement. If it's a big arrow, it means there was a lot of improvement. So the OEM saw some improvement. The tier 2 saw some improvement, but the tier 1 and the tier 3 have big arrows showing that they had some big improvements for them. I want to keep going through. We're pretending like each company is acting alone. So now what happens if only the tier 1 does this lean, the same exact lean initiative that we talked about before, cut production time in half, reduce safety stock in half? If the tier 1 does it, here again is the difference. So I'm always showing you the worst case that everyone's highly reactive. Now remember, everyone's still highly reactive. They're just going to be lean along the way. So they're still highly reactive. That doesn't change their policy, but it changes what they're doing internally, their internal, the lean policies that they're using. And what you'll see in the lower right are different arrows than we saw before. So when the tier 1 makes its changes, the tier 1 benefits, it's got a big arrow, so it has a big benefit. But the tier 3, but the OEM and the tier 2 really don't have much of a benefit. And because like, for example, the tier 2 drops its amplitude, but it increased its time to recover. So it's sort of a net. But the tier 3 gets a little bit of improvement. Its amplitude gets better. Its time to recover a little bit better. Its cycles a little bit better. So again, not everyone benefits when the tier 1 does it. So now let's keep going. If the tier 2 does it, everyone else is back to normal, and the tier 2 tries to do some lean activities. You see a little bit of improvement at the tier 2. The OEM and the tier 1 have no significant changes. The tier 2 has a little bit of improvement. The tier 3 has a lot of improvement. So again, they're kind of spread out. What's interesting is when the tier 3 does this, it becomes very unstable because it's that last company in the supply chain that's already being very aggressive. And when it leans out, it has no buffer inventory, and it way overreacts and way underreacts, and it's horrible. So I just put a big POW symbol there because you don't want to see the results there. It's crazy. But what's interesting, here's the punchline. Here's the end of the story. When everyone implements those same lean activities together and does the exact same thing, look at the difference from left to right. Remember, they're still all acting, they're being aggressive, but they're all lean. And when one company is doing something, everyone else in that supply chain is doing that same thing. They have that synchronicity. There's some flow between them. And just look at the difference, and you almost eliminate completely the bullwhip effect. Everyone is just about the same amplitude. They're all the same cycles. And you'll notice all the green arrows are big arrows. Everyone benefited significantly. So it's not scattered anymore where some benefit, some don't, some sort of benefit, others benefit a lot. Now everyone benefits. So if everyone works in unison and has coordinated policies, then you get this massive improvement when you do that. So very, very counterintuitive, very interesting results. And so when we talk about trust or sharing things within our supply chain, our focus has been very much on sharing data in the supply chain. What are my orders? What am I doing? But what's more important, what we've seen, the more resilient approach is to actually share your policies. How are you doing what you do? Not how much do you have in inventory, but how quickly are you aggressive? Are you slow and controlled? What are you doing? Because if you're aggressive and I'm slow and controlled, we're working against each other. And so, and if you're trying to get lean and I'm not lean, then we're working against each other. And so what's very important is if you really want resilience in your supply chain, there has to be this coordination. And the biggest example of this is Toyota. Toyota, its whole supply chain works together in unison at that macro lean level, like I was showing. They are a demonstration of if you work together, everyone benefits from doing that. And if you go back and look at, I don't have the chart, we showed it in the webinar yesterday, but when the pandemic hit, there's an example of Toyota and Volkswagen being at about the same in terms of market share and vehicles sold and all that. And when the pandemic hit, Toyota went up and Volkswagen went down significantly, and there became this big gap. And Toyota was able to benefit even though everyone else was struggling and there was some bullwhip effect and stockouts and everything. Toyota, because its supply chain was all coordinated, was able to survive that a little bit better. So I've shown that's kind of a key point. Now I've shown this before, and so the challenge is always balancing efficiency and resilience. You can't be 100% either one. But what we're showing is that you can do a balance. You can have some lean, but also be very resilient. Because what you don't want to do, I'm going to use this tree as an example. What you don't want to do is try to optimize and minimize all your cost. Kind of in the leaves out here, when in reality, the better decision was to go this other way. I use the tree as the trunks. And so instead of going optimizing the leaves on this side of the tree, maybe I should have been on this trunk going this other way. So the idea is instead that you take the right strategic direction using some of these what if simulations, and then now you can optimize because you're on the right path. And so it was very interesting. I hope y'all enjoyed seeing some of those results, but it was very interesting to see how the impact that coordinated policies has on resilience, because that's been an area that has not been studied much. And so it was very interesting for us to kind of come up with that example of that and show some results. So we're very happy to get those out there. And we actually did them. So our company is SCM Blocks, but we actually used Beer Game on Steroids, which is our free tool. So anyone can download our free tool, Beer Game on Steroids, and redo the exact experiment and see the exact same results that I just showed. And so those are going to be available to anybody that wants to do that. So I will go ahead and end with that right there and take any questions.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Abdul, let's see if we have any questions here.
Yeah. So it's a really heavy topic. Okay. So I would like to think about the context of Indian supply chain
Okay.
or the context of maybe Middle East, Africa. So how does that, just to, so we can relate, how the overall um, the solution can be
Mhm.
applicable? Okay, can you give some kind of briefing?
Well,
So,
it really, so you'll notice I didn't really say what we were building. It applies to, it's all about processes, and a process is a process wherever it is. And what you have is this imbalance of processes and how those processes are being managed. But if everyone kind of does the same thing and we all agree we're going to do the same thing, so when I
hmm,
move left, you're going to move left also, or if I move right, you're going to move right also. As long as we're doing that, think about any kind of sports team, a football team, or we call it soccer, but everyone's working together and they know the plays, they know what they're doing, rather than a bunch of superstars just trying to do their own thing all the time. It's that teamwork element. That's when I say coordinated policies, think of teamwork, and that everyone kind of knows. We've all practiced, we know what we're going to do. I know how you're going to act in a situation, you know how I'm going to act, and that's the power. And when we get to that level where our processes are coordinated, it really makes the supply chain resilient because we're all working together. And we just showed that, and now we can do some more examples, and hopefully people will try to do some more. But it was just very interesting to get that out there and to be able to show that, because no one's looking that deep yet.
yeah, it's very, very, really, it's a big opportunity to optimize the entire supply chain. So
Hmm.
here we are not talking about only one node of supply chain or one link of supply chain. So we are talking
Right.
about
That's where
entire
it's
supply chain.
dangerous, is
Mhm.
when one link decides, one company decides, I'm going to do this, and they only think about themselves. It's
Mhm.
it's a system. We're all in this
Mhm.
together. And it's it's interesting how, even though I'm trying to improve the supply chain, but by focusing on me, I can actually make it more difficult for someone else in the supply chain, right? And we showed a little bit of that. In fact, on one of them, I didn't highlight it too much, but one of the suppliers went down, like its performance got worse. And so it's all about not acting as an individual and
Mhm.
thinking I'm only going to improve this one part. If you look at the whole supply chain as a system, you realize, oh, I actually have to care and understand what's happening at my tier 4 or tier 5 or what, because that eventually impacts me.
Mhm. Fantastic. See, here there are traditional supply chains in this region, like automotive. Okay, so
Hmm.
where the OEM plays a major role of managing the entire supply chain. So I think
Hmm.
in this scenario, the OEM have to lead to optimize the supply chain. Okay, and then all the tier 1, tier 2 guys and other vendors need to support that. So is that
Right.
how to apply in the real time? Okay.
Yes.
And it is a pharma is one of the large supply chain
Hmm.
industry where you have so many products and then so many component manufacturers, 3PL operators, kind of thing. And then there is a retail. Okay.
Hmm.
So, and I think, yes, as I understand the, the details, so this model can be applied in any supply chain.
In any
Okay.
supply chain,
Any supply chain. Yeah.
you'll notice I didn't even talk about what the supply chain made. It doesn't matter. It's a thing, and it's very interesting. You talked about the Indian automotive industry, and that there's a cultural difference between the sort of the East and the West. I'm
Mhm.
over in the United States, and the East has more of a systems view or appreciation. So the Indian automotive supply chain is probably already doing some things close to what we just talked about, but not in the United States at all. We're cowboys. We're the Wild
Mhm.
West cowboys that always want to just I'm gonna
Heroes.
I'm gonna do my own thing, and it's killing us. And that's what we're trying to show here is the system view, the appreciation of this system, and that we're all in this together has a lot of power.
Correct. So here, how closely it is for multi-echelon supply chain business networks. I think these two the concepts how the whole supply chain works. Multi-echelon supply chain is more closely integrated, they're connected. So here,
Hmm.
even in the normal supply chain can work, can optimize it. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes. And again, it's not just being connected, it's being coordinated. It's not just that I'm sharing information or it's that I am sharing how I'm acting, what my policies are, so that when I'm aggressive, using my example, when if I'm aggressive, you are also aggressive, and together we're aggressive, and that helps us both. It doesn't help us when you're aggressive and I'm not aggressive. We all have to be
Mhm.
doing the same thing. We all have to be, and we have to be balanced. So when you get to the optimization, the lean part of it, if we're not following that same flow, we're all not working together, then we get these imbalances that only make the problem worse. I'm already ordering too much or under ordering, and I have the bulb effect, but now you're going to make it worse because I'm overreacting. You're running out of inventory, and I'm having trouble now. So it's all about that coordination, that we're all doing the same thing together. So if you're going to get lean, I need to get lean. Otherwise, we don't all benefit.
Yes, you don't get the benefit. So the whole
Right.
supply chain have to optimize. Okay, so optimizing a link or a node does not going to help for the entire supply
Correct.
chain.
It's just like we do within a company, except let's just expand that view. Because within a company, we do that. We look at a process and its process steps, and we say, oh, they need to work together and they need to be smooth and the
Correct.
exact same amount. Bottlenecks, get rid of bottlenecks, get rid of waste, all that stuff. We got to do that at the company level also, because otherwise it really doesn't matter what we do inside because I'm still not getting deliveries from my supplier when I need them. So who cares? So yeah. Anyway, very interesting. It was fun to do that, and I'm anxious to kind of publish those results a little bit more.
Fantastic, fantastic topic. I think I'm just thinking how to apply this in the real time. So it's fantastic. There is no question that the concept is not applicable. Definitely it is applicable and it is very required also. But how does
Hmm.
that can apply in the real time? Maybe it's needed some kind of government entity support where this can be bring into awareness. So primarily,
Hmm.
it's an awareness is also a problem. Okay, so people need to
Yeah.
be aware of the optimizing the supply chain as a whole. Okay, and
I
somebody
think
has
that's
to take the initiative.
Yeah, I think that's where we are. That's a very good point. Is the awareness is that right now we, at least in America, again, the East, the culture for across the ocean from America is they appreciate working together in systems. So,
Mhm.
your culture is that way. The Asian culture is that way. But for America, the assumption is the way to make things better is for me to get better. But
Mm.
that's not always the case. We can all be mediocre, and as long as we're all mediocre together, we can actually outperform
Mhm.
a team that, a supply chain, because the competition isn't company to company, it's supply chain
Mm.
to supply chain,
Supply
right?
chain.
That's what it is. And so let's look at the whole supply chain. Why not? And that's
That's
all we're doing is expanding the perspective to look at the whole supply chain.
fantastic. That's true point. The competition is not from one company to another company. It is from one supply chain to another supply chain. I think
For
this way
sure.
it is actually the supply chain members once they think that we are into one supply chain ecosystem and we need to optimize,
Hmm.
then you will have your pressure will be reduced. Right? Say,
Yeah.
okay, now we have to work in a collaborated way so that we can optimize. And sometimes what you are doing, you have to undo something little to for the sake of
For
supply chain.
sure.
It's also
Yeah.
possible. Yeah. So that
It's
is
very
something you
possible.
need to have an open thing,
Hmm.
and then a small optimization across the supply chain will have a complete. And once the supply chain become competitive, then you are winning. Your supply chain will
Exactly. Then
win.
everyone sees the benefit and they lean in more. They're like, okay, this is working. What else can we do? And yeah, there's a book. It's probably 20 or 30 years old. Stephen Covey, who wrote the
Mm.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or
Even
whatever. He's got one called The Speed of Trust.
speed of
And
trust.
the speed of trust. And if we trust each other, and what we're trying to push is it's not just trust sharing data. So here in the United States, we talk about trust. Well, trust your suppliers, share your information, but it's not just information. It's not just my data. It's not just my orders or my inventory levels. It's how am I acting? What are my policies
Personal
so that
policy.
we can work together? And we are not to that level of trust at all. But if we get there, we've seen the results. I mean, they're phenomenal.
There, I think there are some supply chains already they're practicing it, like Walmart.
Probably
So
so.
they are
Yeah.
Johnson and
I don't
Johnson.
know
They are
every
doing it.
supply chain. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they are doing it. Great, sir. So it's fantastic topic. So key takeaways, if you would like to share, and then maybe we can conclude. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Key takeaways are that coordination with the entire of every company in the supply chain is where the true power and competitiveness and resilience can be found.
Fantastic, sir. I think this is. I'm just thinking loud. Now, this is such an important concept, but how can do it? We can do it in real time. Okay, how can
Hmm.
we make sure that everybody understand this, and then how can they try as a collective, as a supply chain? Okay, so
Well,
the only possibility is somebody in the supply chain who is a leader have to
hmm.
initiate this.
Yes.
Then things can go around
Right.
and
Everyone
success.
won't jump on board. Somebody has to say, we are in a bad situation. We need to change. Everything we've done right now is not working. We're going to
Mhm.
try something new.
Fantastic, sir. And I think the beer game, what you suggested. So I think everybody, we strongly recommend everybody to try. Okay, and
It's
then
free. It's
yeah, it's
free.
free,
Yeah.
and everybody try and understand. I think we can get the link and share with all the participants also.
Yeah. In
Okay.
fact, can I put that in the, I'm just putting it in the chat right now.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah. So anyone can go there and get the installation files, some example files, things like that. So yeah, that's where we're keeping everything.
fantastic, sir. That's a really great thing. Okay, so I thank on behalf of all participants and the other speakers, the organizers. So thank you very much for joining all the way from US, the early
You
morning
bet.
for you. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I've got a large cup of coffee, so I'm good.
So have a great time, and
You too.
definitely would like to, and we post the video very soon. If somebody
Okay.
missed it, so it can be accessed. And also, I'm sure this is a heavy content, heavy presentation. So any questions, the supply chain leaders, they can post it to
Hmm.
Chris, and
Yeah,
we get it get answered. And if anyone wants to
absolutely.
learn more and to for your organizations to adopt this, please feel free. Either we put Chris contact details, and also, or you can connect us. We can just introduce you. So thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, and have a great time. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you one and all for making this day very successful. So let us try to conclude day with a vote of thanks, and also let us recap. So we had 10 sessions today. We started with Suresh Kavali talking about the AI and operations and supply chain. Then we continued with you. He talked about very nicely about S&OP and IPP, especially for the enterprise agility. Then Captain Sanjeev Kumar gave very nice insights on the people part of the supply chain. Then Rajiv Ganju took us to the completely different uh, wavelength of manufacturing, execution, and automations. Okay. Then Ms. Hanuma took us through AI journey, how to take up the organization and some best practices and some latest developments, what is going. And Samir Kaiwar helped us to know about the wisdom, the importance of the wisdom for human wisdom. Uh, and what is its importance in the digital era. Okay, Alexander Borg, yeah, as usual, he did a fantastic explanation of end-to-end supply chain optimization with a case study. Alex Goma has explained the key best practices, and then how to make the S&OP and IBP work in any organization from the leadership point of view. And I presented some use cases and also how AI, IoT, and supply chain optimization logics, all three can work together to help you truly a very competitive supply chain. Then Dr. Chris has concluded the day with the collaborative planning across multi-enterprise supply chain networks. It is fantastic topic. It's really emerging topic, and it will be very popular in future. And I wish all the best to Dr. Chris. And so thank you, every participant. Thank you very much for today's session. And I take this as an opportunity. And welcome tomorrow. So 10 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Welcome tomorrow. We will be talking about supply chain execution systems, warehousing, manufacturing, logistics, and some technology topics tomorrow. So welcome to you tomorrow, and then make sure that all the questions, if you have any remaining, just please post it, and then we'll make sure that they get answered. So thank you very much, and have a great time. Thank you very much.